anything, on anything. Okay, so thank you very much, Phil at Learning, and Siyal. We are happy to have you. Please get into the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sarah, for introducing and giving this a great opportunity and connected with you all related to this such an important topic, that is the international climate policy and the youth engagement, because we know that this is the thing that we needed most, because around the world we have more than 50% population is based on the youth, and we must be aware of how the climate policies are working, how the international law and the regulations are working for the climate change, for the water, and for the environmental crisis. So we must be aware and we must prepare for our next generations, how they are must be fully prepared and must be aware of how the climate policies and the climate rules, regulations are working for this. And this is a great platform where the youth can know about their power, their knowledge, their energy in that regard, how they can utilize that power for creating a change in their own countries, in their regions, or even in their own communities. So this is a great platform, and I would like to start my presentation. And I hope I'm audible to everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Pirah. We are able to hear you loud and clear.
Thank you so much for this, because I just wanted to share my key points and the highlights of the climate policy, and must be heard by every youth and the women around the globe, because if we wanted to if we wanted to do something for our countries, for our communities, and even for our people, we must be aware of our energies, we must be aware of the powers, but we have to use them in a proper way. And that proper way is the knowledge. That proper way is the platform. We have to use the knowledge, and we must have a platform where we can utilize the knowledge related to this. So let's start today's presentation, and we are going to empower the next generation so they can take an action in terms of the climate crisis, water, or the environmental issues, and how the youth can engage in the climate policies. So this is today's agenda, presentation agenda. So let's start with the first, that is the introduction, and how the introduction is going to work, and how these climate policies, or what is the climate issues, and how they are working for this, we must get an idea. So first, you have to get in proper information and knowledge what is the climate change and what is the weather. Actually, the climate change is a long-term pattern or the long-term effects of our natural phenomena that is having a longer effects and the longer patterns. But the weather is the shortest pattern, which can be changed in 24 hours or the 48 hours. But the climate change is slowly and gradually is changes in our earth, in our soil, in our water, in our temperature, in our global effects that are slowly and gradually affecting our lifestyles or our environmental issues. So we have to get an idea, we have to knowledge related to the climate change and the weather. So weather can be changed, but the climate change cannot be the change. Until and unless we have the proper knowledge, until and unless we have to take in proper mitigation or adaptation rules and the regulations, and we have to use or remove those things which are contributing in the climate change. For this, because every country is suffering from the climate change, and every region of the world is affected by the climate change, whether in terms of the highest rainfalls, whether in terms of heaviest rainfalls, and even the droughts, or even the climate mobility just because of the climate issues. So there must be an international entity or the organization that can make a proper rules, regulations, and the law that like bound to those countries or the regions which are contributing in the climate change more, rather than the one that are least contributor in the climate change. So we have the international organizations, international climate policy frameworks like the UNFCCC, and there's a globally corporation organizations that are working. They are making rules and regulations to mitigate, to adopt the changes that are having the ratio or the rate of the climate changes that are affected every country and the region. And in this, youth can play a major role by giving their more ideas, by sharing their more related to this, because we believe youth can make or have a power to change every country's future or even the world's future as well. Uh, there's a myth that if we cannot protect our present, how we can protect or the talk about the present future. We are the future and we have to protect our present, then we can talk about the future as well. So let's move on to the next slide, that is about what is a climate policy and how the climate policies are working, who are the ones that are creating the climate policies or the laws and the rules and the regulations related to the climate change. So basically, it is all about the strategic framework that is adopted by every government organizations, every government, every country, whether the national or even the international organizations, also the international bodies that are addressing, mitigating, or adaptation the climate change. So in this, the climate policies also measures the strategies that is implemented by the various level, whether the locally or internationally, they must address the climate change. For this, we have the climate policy, like for example, one of the country that is least contributor in the climate change. They do not use any excessive fossil fuels. They do not have any kind of things that are contributing in the climate change. But they are the most affected one. It is the simple example that if something is happening in your neighboring countries and you are thinking that it cannot be affect you, it is a completely myth. And it's a wrong idea, because slowly and gradually what is happening in your neighboring country, it will be automatically affect you in next 5 years or might be next 10 years. For that, to reduce the ratio of the climate changes, we must have the policies. We must have to restrict those developed countries that are affecting the developing countries, because developing countries are still in a developing phase and the developed countries are contributing, like in terms of having the heaviest contributions in terms of fossil fuels, in terms of industrializations. So we must have the rules and regulations for those developed countries. So they must think about the developing countries. So the climate policies components can be the greenhouse gas emissions, which can be reduced by adaptations or the mitigations. Even we must, the climate adaptation and even the resilience, we have the renewable energy transitions and the environmental regulations as well. The simple purpose is to ensure the sustainable development while the protecting ecosystem and the human health. Because climate change and the human health are interconnected with each other. If your climate is completely damaged, your health cannot be in a secure form, because climate changes are also affecting the human psychology. If you are displaced from your home, from your country, or we can say from your region, and you are forced to migrate from your place just because of heaviest rainfalls, or might be just because of the drought, it will affect slowly, and your generations can also affect just because of those climate changes. So if you want to protect your health, you have to protect the climate change. And it is not about the effect of the climate change in last 10 years. No, it was the last 50 years. That is the slowly and the gradually is affected our climate change. And we must take an action for the next 15 years in which we have to reduce those things which are contributing in the climate change. And for this, climate policy is the wonderful framework by the international organizations, and they are bounding the government of developing developed countries. So must the developed countries cannot be affected by the climate change. As I was continuously saying about what is adaptation and what is the mitigation and how they both are working together and how we have to reduce and what is a specific mitigation adaptation. So simple mitigation is actually the action we have to reduce the emission of the greenhouse gases that can cause the climate change, whereas the adaptation is completely opposite of that, because we have to take an action to manage the risk of the climate change that are impacting our climate. So in this, we must think about in a mitigate, and we must have the sustainable transportation, and we have to use the less fossil fuel, we have to use the less petrol that are using by the cars. So the cars must be the solar system, or they must have the different kind of the model of the cars that are using the less, we can say, petrols or the fossil fuels. Then we must have the clean energy in this, and in that clean energy, we can say wind and the solar energy panels can also be used for this. And also we have the efficient energy. So how we have to use the efficient energy? Because we have to use those kind of electrical appliances or the electrical things that are using the less energy. Simply, you have to save the energy that is the contributing in climate change, and it is slowly and gradually affecting the global and contributing in the global warming as well. So in right side, we have the adaptation, because we have to adopt those things or the technologies that are reducing in a disaster management, and we have to business the constituency, because we have like uh, the previous in like the last 20 years, there's a kind of earthquake, but now we can predict earthquakes even in a 5 seconds. 5 seconds side, it's still, we can say, a major contribution to predict the earthquake in the 5 seconds as well. And even we have buildings that are disasters prone, or also the earthquake prone as well. Then we have the flood protection schemes, or the flood protection technologies that are protecting, and we can like move the water, and we must have like the we can say different conservations of the water. Then we have the infrastructure for the upgrades, like we can predict the weather, or we have to predict where the rainfall must be the heaviest. So before this, that are affecting in this. So the technology is playing a major role in this. And the things that are contributing or in place of both of these, like the water conservation projects, then the renewable energy systems, local food, like we are adopting those strategies or the technologies that without the specific season, now you can get a winter vegetables or the fruits in a summer as well. And secondly, the summer fruits or the vegetables, you can easily get it into the winter as well. So this is also a kind of a technology, or also kind of the adaptation or the mitigation, because even the population, world's population is the greater day by the day. It is cannot be the fulfill the requirements of the food. So we have to go to those ways which are fulfill our requirements in terms of agri-food. Then we have the education to educate people in terms of the technology. Then we have the complete communities in terms of infrastructure must be the eco-friendly. Then the forest, we have to plant more trees, that because it is believed that more of the carbon dioxide is the captured by the plants, and even it is the captured by the ocean and the sea levels. So we have to think about that. So secondly, we have the entities about the climate change, and we have to get an idea what are the origins and the international climate policies. So the international climate policies are brought in 1980s first time about the global agenda about the climate warnings or the climate changes. And then it was again after 8 years in 1988 about the establishment of IPPC, which is the Intergovernmental Panels about. So sorry, let me share my presentation again. Okay, So what are the international climate policies and how they are working for this? Because in 1988, first time, the established of the Intergovernmental Panel on the Climate Change, which is now is known as the IPPC. So the basically work of IPPC was, it is the intergovernmental, we can say, a panel on the climate change that is used or that is worked for the intergovernmental body of the United Nations, which is work to provide the scientific information to every country in all the levels so they can develop the policy related to the climate change. Because we know that every country has their own agenda, every country has their own climate issues or the climate contributions, climate change contributions. So they must have the scientific data. Like, for example, Pakistan might be have the issue related to the fossil fuels, and another country might be have the problem to the shortage of the water, because over there the rainfall is the short, and this rainfall is due lack of the rainfall or the less rainfall is due to climate change. For this, the another country have the different IPPC rules and the regulations. Similarly, for the Pakistan has the different IPPCs. So it is the IPPC's only work to give the scientific data to every country so they can develop their own on a country level, we can say, climate policies. Then after 4 years in 1992, the United Nations framework has been occurred, and it was the convention where the 190 8 countries has been contributed, and it was the first time they come together. They have the same agenda, they have the same problems, and they have the same agenda or the future plannings. So how we can mitigate and adopt for the climate policies. So another one is about the UNFCCC, that is a framework on this, the United Nations framework on the climate change. It is on, it was the first in 1992. It was, again, it was in 1994. And it was first time it was happened in the Brazil city, that's Rio de Janeiro, where they all come together, 198 countries. They have the same key principles. And because we all have the common agenda, but the different responsibilities. Like I have told you about, Pakistan have the different issues related to the climate change. Similarly, another country have the different issues, but they are again related to the climate change. So we have the common problems, but the different responsibilities. Then we have to precautionary measurements or the principles. Then we have to sustainable development, in that every country can protect their environment, they can protect their infrastructure, they can protect their people as well. So in 1992, they called that convention or the agenda, that is the conferences of parties, and it is the annual meeting where every country come together in a one single country. They will talk about the climate change. Like, for example, in COP29, that was held last year in the year of 2024 in the month of November. Similarly, in the next year, which is 2025, now, again in the month of November, another COP30 will be held in the Brazil. And so the countries come together, they have the same agenda, but the different responsibilities. So every year, the same COP happened in different countries. So every country come together to showcase what the climate changes has affected to them and how they are mitigating, how their adaptations, and how they are contributing, or how they are going to working this. Then we have the Kyoto Protocol, which has happened in a city of the Japan in 1997. So this Kyoto Protocol is actually about the international agreement between the industrialized nations to we have significantly, they are reduced their greenhouse gas emissions. So Kyoto is the Japan city where in 1997, the countries, 37 industrialized countries, and even the European communities are come together, and they passed the bill or the protocol where the industrialized nations, they must significantly reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. It is all about the industries, whether oil and gas industries, whether they are using the cotton industries, because every industry uses the petrol, every industry uses the oil and gas. So they are contributing to climate change. So Kyoto Protocol is all about that. And they must use the clean energy mechanisms. They must invest in emission reduction projects in the developing countries. Because developed countries are already the developed, but they are contributing in a greenhouse gas emissions in a developing countries. So developing countries is like Pakistan, Uganda, or even the India, Bangladesh, we are the developing countries. Developed is like the America, is like the European countries. So they are the developed one. So they have to invest in the developing countries in terms of the projects. They have the less emission in terms of the climate change or in terms of the greenhouse gases. So only the United Nations of America is not contribute or participated in this Kyoto Protocol. But other than this, every country was present over there in 1997. So 192 countries was there and they agreed on that. Then we have the another Paris Agreement that the specific agenda or the objective was to temperature, that is the global temperature rised about 200 centigrade. So we have to reduce up till about 1.5 centigrade at least. So it was first time Paris Agreement was held in COP21 in Paris, France. It was the universal participation, like all the countries has been come together. They have submitted their own agenda. That agenda specifically calls the nationally determined contributions. So every country they have to submit it their we can say they have to submit their national determined contribution. So what is a nationally determined contribution? Like for example, Uganda have this another problems, but it is related to climate change. Similarly, Pakistan have another problems, but it is related to climate change. So they all come together with a specific agenda, how they have to reduce in terms of those things which are contributing in the climate change. Pakistan have to submit a report, which is NDCs after 5 years. Similarly, Uganda can submit it, their NDCs after 5 years. So every country can submit it this NDCs. Then the key mechanism which I have told you about NDCs, because every country has their own targets, own mechanism and national circumstances. So they have to report and after 5 years in the conferences of parties. And also the one of the major contribution in a Paris Agreement was the climate finance, which is paying about $100 billion to every year to the developing nations, because developing nations are more affected by the climate change, where they are like the least contributor in the climate change. So this is the simple terms which I told you about the climate change or about the Paris Agreement, which is about we have to reduce the temperature about 1.5 centigrade, because it's 1 century that the temperature of Earth is increased around 2 centigrade. And you know that if a body temperature is more than that, because body temperature is 37 centigrade. But if the body cannot bear the temperature which is limited to the 37, our body cannot be work proper. Similarly, you can imagine those microorganisms which are beneficial for our food chain, for our environment, for our climate, for our biodiversity, how they can suffer when the temperature increase about 2 centigrade. Even the species has been washed out, vanished just because of increase of 2 centigrade. So we have to reduce at least 1.5 centigrade. This is all about the Paris Agreement. Then we must invest the enhanced resilience and adaptation to the climate change impacts that are occur. Then we have the climate finance. We have to invest in those projects which are the least contributing to climate change. For example, the solar panels or the solar energies, wind energies. So these are the things in which we have to invest it. Another thing that is related to the Paris Agreement is about the Article 6, because whether the Article 6.2, whether the 6.4 or 8, they are interconnected with each other. Like I would give you the best example, because it is all about the least accessible and the most complex article of the Paris Agreement. because it allows countries to cooperate voluntarily with each other, but they have to achieve the emission reduction targets, which is set by their nationally determined contributions, and they have to transfer the carbon credits. Let me give you the first example of the Article 6.2, which allows the bilateral trading of the carbon credits between the different countries, which they have to meet the indices. And even the carbon credit, the credit between 6.2 articles, which is called as internationally transferred mitigation outcomes. And so they have already traded among the countries. So it is, we can simply say in simple words, it is a decentralized approach, and the countries are yet decided on their own guideline for trading credits. Then we have the Article 6.4, which is also creates a new global carbon market overseen by UNFCCC, and which is also refers to the supervisory body, which is SP. And it is also a market that could begin the operating in 2025, but yet they replace the old enable carbon trading market, which is the Kyoto Protocol. And also they are the traders that are called the Article 6.4, and they can also be brought by the different countries, companies, or even the individuals as well. So we simple say Article 6.5 is all about design to support sustainable development and mobilize the private sector, so they can participate in the climate change mitigation beyond the emission restrictions, or we can say emission reductions. So the last Article 6.8 is about the provide a formal frameworks for the non-market approaches for the climate cooperations between the countries. And they all are talk about the trading of the emission is involved. And it is approaches only based on technology transfer, capacity building, and developed aid or the taxes to discourage emissions. So still, they are the less, we can say, a well-defined than the Article 6.2 and Article 4. So this is all about the Articles 6 of the Paris Agreement. So now we have the Glasgow Climate Act, which is in 2021 in COP26, and the climate finance. So they are also enforcing the 1.5 centigrade, which has also happened in a Paris Agreement. They are calling for the accelerated phase out of the we can say abated coal, then emphasize the climate finance, even the loss and damage. So basically the loss and damage is all about the country is contributing less, but affecting most. So countries can have the proper knowledge what damage has been done to their country. So it will be payable by the developed countries. And they have the work more on the nationally determined contribution and disease, which is submitted by after every 5 years to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in every COP, and might be in next COP, which is in a COP 13 in Brazil. So they all work together in this. Now, what is the climate finance? Because climate finance is actually pledging the billion per year, 100 billion per year by the 2022 from the developed countries. So they have to give the developing nations in terms of adaptation, mitigation, even the capacity building. Or they also, the discussions has been done on a new collective qualified goals for the post-COP, post-2025. So what is loss and damage? It is all about the climate impacts that are the beyond adaptations. Because if your country is damaged by the climate change, so you have to collect the data, how much damage has been done to your country's infrastructure, your people, or even the livelihood, or even the agriculture. So you have to get in data. And it is all about the giving in paying to the developing countries which are affected by the climate change. So the major and the important role, how the youth can contribute in a climate policies. So climate policies in a climate, for the developing climate policies, youth can play a major role in this, because we all know that youth are representative of the globally organizations, globally working business communities, or even the national, international communities. And the youth population is all about 50% of global populations. When the 50% is coming together, they are working for the same agenda, same like the common goal, of course, we have to achieve it. And they are including in a local, we can say a vocal in a climate justice movements. They are providing innovative or technological solutions for all the challenges. They are also pushing for accountability and transparency in the international negotiations. So this is a great platform, UNFCCC scope every year happening in different countries. So this is a great way to be participate in that, to raise your voice, because there's a lot of the global stages where the youth can participate, where they must take an action. Because one of the best example I would give you, in Pakistan, we have banned the plastic bottles in we can say a government official meetings. And from the next month, the month of the June, from 15, we will ban all the plastic shoppers in every form of the plastic shoppers. So this is the great achievement when you're going to do something for your present, and then present is automatically connected with your future as well. So there's a lot of the youth global movements and the policy proposals where I would give you best examples of the Greta Thunberg's Fridays for the Future, and she was started a solo campaign or the work for the move. She started a movement now. It is globally actively working for the climate changes. Then we have the MOCOP, where the youth organize simulations of the COP before the COP29. They are proposing the policy proposals. Even Youth for the Climate, they are arranging the pre-COP events that are only focusing on the youth contributions. Then we have the, we can say, they all are working for the climate education curricula, then just transition and green jobs for the youth. International, we can say, international organizations are must support to those people or the youth who are wanted to make change in their communities, in their countries, or even in their regions. So as I given you examples of the global movements, one of the best example, Greta Thunberg's Fridays for the Future. She started in 2018 in a Sweden country, and now it has inspired millions of students, millions of the people worldwide. And she also stated in a United Nations summit and COP meetings as well. The second, I would give you the example of the Vanessa Nakate from Uganda. She's also have the organization Rise Up for the movement, and she advocates for the African voices on the global forum, and she also highlights the intersection of economic change and the justice, social justice as well. The conferences of youth is the best platform where the youth from all around the world can gather on a one platform for the one agenda, youth representation in the climate policies. And this happened every year before the COP, every COP. Like, for example, in the last year, 2024, the conferences of parties 19 was held in Baku, Azerbaijan. Next will be conferences of youth 20 will be held in Brazil just before the conference of parties like COP 30. It will be the COP Quai 20. So every youth must contribute in that. They must gather. They must have the same agenda in this. And it was organized by the UN constituency is the Yongo. So Yongo is a great platform where every country can where every youth from different countries, they come together and work for their own countries and the communities. Now, we all know that when the youth is wanted to do something for their countries, for their people, they have the opportunities, but of course, they have the limitations, restrictions, and challenges as well. The challenges are lack of access to the decision-making spaces, lack of the funding or logistic barriers. Also, they are limited to the representation in the negotiations. Even their tokenism versus meaningful participation and need for the mentorship and capacity buildings as well. So this is all thing I would say they all are affecting or the working for this, but sometimes the restrictions, even on the national level, even the international level, in terms of the fundings, in terms of talking of appreciations, in terms of mentorship, in terms of providing the platforms so they can raise their voice, so they can, whatever the agenda, whatever the idea or the technological information they have, so they can must contribute in this. There now the opportunity, there is a lot of opportunities for the youth. They can contribute, they can work in this. Even the local pathways, just they must be hopeful, they must be enthusiastic and energetic to work for their organizations and for their people. And there's a lot of international organizations are working for the one agenda, youth empowerment. So as I told you, youth plays a major role in terms of technology and social media, because they all are actively working for this, creating applications like the best application yet up till now that has created the collecting or capturing the carbon footprints. This is also contributions of the youth. So they have to contribute or they work together in terms of the technology, social media, and the youth advocacy. You have the cell phone, use it, post it on social media. Every youth from all around the world can support you. So now the recommendations is about we have to integrate youth voices in a formal climate governance. We have allocate resources for the youth-led climate initiatives, because we have to support the youth in terms of the capacity building and in terms of education, in terms of training, and also in terms of the financial support, because every youth is wanted to contribute in that. But youth have the less or the lack of resources in terms of contributing in a climate policies. So we have to strengthen youth representation every climate forum, whether the national, international. So climate youth quota must be there where the youth can contribute in this. Then we have the climate policies, which is only effective with the inclusion engagement. So youth can also bring up passion, innovation, and the urgency from grassroots actions to the global diplomacy, and youth leading the way. Also, they are the future of climate policy, because we, if we cannot talk about today's, how we talk about our future as well. Our agendas, our points should be added into the policies, because we have to bear it. If we can't take action today or make the rules and regulations, how we can talk about our future? So we must talk about our future. We must talk about the present. We have to implement and must give in the platform, or we can say must give in the ways to the youth so they can contribute in this. So these are the references of today's presentation. Thank you so much for listening me and giving this great opportunity to share my views related to the youth engagement in the climate policies. And thank you so much for having me. If you have any question, you can reach out to me or you can ask me now as well. Thank you so much. This is all from my side.
Thank you so much, Siyal. Thank you so much for the elaborate presentation. I have really enjoyed and followed. I don't know other members. Sarah, are you around?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Siyal. That was very detailed, that was very particular, and that was very informative. So I don't know if we were able to record this session or if Siyal will be able to share her presentation, if that's okay, for the learning of the entire team. But this was very productive, and I believe that right now we have a very intense understanding of what international climate policy is and how the laws therein impact the engagement of youth. Thank you very much for unpacking the articles in the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC, very critical